Hi, my name's Christine and I live in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England, and this is more for my family and my children's children in the future to look back on, because this coronavirus pandemic is something we've never experienced before, and an entire global lockdown is never something that's been experienced by the world before. So it's part of history, and I just wanted to keep a record of it. We forget, um, we forget things that have happened. We forget events in life. We forget how things affected us. Memories get tainted, and I want to record everything while it's still fresh in my mind. And to help me, I've had my calendar out because I was marking days off, and wrote little notes. So let's go back to, before, at the end of 2019, 2020 was looking quite promising. I'd been offered a new apartment in city centre, which I was quite happy about, and I love it. And things were looking good. But around about the 7th of March, so I moved in my new apartment in city centre January the 3rd, and in mid-February I had a lot of workmen in and out doing different repairs, changing the heating and things like that. By 7th of March, we knew about this virus and things. I wasn't feeling too good. I was feeling tired, very sleepy, very tired, and I would normally have my grandkids over to stay, and I didn't, and I decided to put myself in isolation just in case I picked something up. I've already got an underlying condition which affects my immune system, which I won't go into in this one, so I isolated myself, and I would say the most of the time I did that, between the 7th of March and the 18th of March, I slept more than what I was awake. Just absolutely exhausted. When I was awake, I was just doing bits and bobs around the house and feeding myself, although my appetite wasn't really there. And when I was eating, I did notice that I wasn't really tasting food either. On the 18th of March, my youngest granddaughter came to stay, and she did have a little bit of a cold because I remember using Vicks on her. And when I washed her hands in the bathroom, because every time when she came in, we washed her hands. Every time she went to the toilet, we washed her hands. But because in this apartment there's been an issue with drainage in the bathroom, we keep getting silverfish. So I don't like her to walk in the bathroom. I take her in and I'll sit her up on the bath and I'll wash her hands in the sink. So I'd noticed a rash across the tops of her hands. Now by the end of that evening, I also had that rash on my hands. Now when I'm thinking about the rash, the first time anybody noticed a rash was my youngest daughter's partner. He had, out of the blue, a collapsed lung. Just out of the blue, his lung collapsed. He ended up in hospital, and that was the first time we noticed a rash on anybody, was when he was in hospital. He had a rash, and I had stated to my daughter, it's probably the starch in the sheets. Anyway, she got the rash, and then my youngest granddaughter got the rash, then I got the rash, and then my youngest granddaughter's mum got the rash. She had it on her hands and her feet. So we don't know whether that's part of it, because we now know that a rash is one of the lesser symptoms of it. But I was tired the first week, then I had the rash. The next day, the 19th of March, I took Ruby home. I had Holly with me. She'd been dropped off early. We spent a couple of hours at my eldest daughter's, then went shopping for food and essentials. Come home. Holly went back home. Next day, because I couldn't get toilet roll or bread, essential items, on the Thursday, I went back out on the Friday. I managed to get bread and toilet roll and things from 3 different shops in city centre. By Friday afternoon, I felt exhausted. I remember ringing my dad, FaceTime, and saying, oh, I'm so tired, I think I'm going to go for a nap, which I did. Saturday morning when I got up, I had a cough. And at first it was kind of like, from the throat, it was more like a dry, tickly cough from my throat. And it was getting constant and more persistent. By the Sunday, it was horrendous. The cough was horrendous. My breathing was getting worse. I could barely speak because I couldn't get my breath. Eventually, by Sunday evening, my daughters convinced me to call the NHS 111 line, which I did. And that was nearing midnight on Sunday. But I'd been so terrified. I was kind of trying not to let my kids know how terrified I was because I didn't want them worrying. Because what could they do? Anyway, phoned 111. Took 30 minutes to get through. Was asked a lot of questions. It took a long time to answer those questions because I kept coughing. And that person even said, oh my God, you sound terrible. She put me through the people who were dealing with coronavirus. Again, asked the same questions, and then was told a doctor would call back within 6 hours. That Sunday evening must have been the longest night of my life. I didn't actually think I was going to make it to Monday morning, and no call came within the 6 hours. I cried, I got angry, I felt alone, that there was nobody to help me. I just had to wait. So it was 9 o'clock the next morning, Monday morning, when the doctor did ring. And when I answered the phone, I heard, hello, how can I help you today? Which sparked anger in me immediately, because surely you would have the notes there of why you're calling me. So I had to try and speak to him through my cough and breathlessness. He asked a lot of questions again. He got me to breathe in and hold my breath for a count. After all the questioning and doing that, he said he diagnosed that it was very likely that I had coronavirus. Did I have a temperature? But at that time I wasn't taking my temperature, and I didn't feel like I had a temperature, although I'd had the chills. So he said, it sounds like my body's fighting it, but if I got worse, to dial 999. And when I asked how worse, he said critical. Now I live on my own, so if it was critical, I may not get to my phone. Even though it's usually beside me on the bed. Critical is critical. And if I can dial, I can't speak because it's so bad. What would happen then? It was kind of then I knew I wasn't going to get any help. So I asked if I could get a test. No, there was no tests available. Right. So that was that. That was the only contact I've had with NHS. And I think from then I just thought, there's nobody but you. And then that same day, 23rd of March, the government shut down the UK. Everything had to shut down. Shops, businesses, we were now in lockdown. So my kids, I couldn't be with my kids couldn't be with me. And that's a hard thing. So I just knew I was on my own. What was I going to do? Lie down and die? Nope. I've been through a lot in my life. Dealt with a lot, handled a lot, and conquered a lot. And this wasn't going to get me. And I knew if I just lay down, it was going to. So I just kept moving. I couldn't stand up straight. I had tightness in my chest. dry cough, breathlessness. I just can't. Trying to get in a little bit of air. Scary. It was scary. So I decided I would sleep down here in my living room, which is 26 foot long, and I have a trundle day bed at the bottom. So I lay propped up on there for an entire week that is kind of dark and covered in fog. I can't remember everything about it. My eldest daughter was dropping me off every other day, hot food at my door, and supplies. My body was craving natural yogurt, and I love natural yogurt, so she was bringing me natural yogurt. I did start taking more vitamin C and started taking vitamin D, steaming my face to loosen everything, breathing, concentrating on my breathing. I know I've seen videos later now on breathing techniques to use for the lungs, but what I was using was what I used for keeping me calm in situations, and it's the breathing up my nose, holding, breathing out my mouth, breathing in, holding, breathing out my mouth. But to me, and I was imagining my body working in my lungs, and do you know what, every day, and this is going to sound silly to people, but I was kind of thanking my body and thanking my lungs. Another day I'm getting through, another day I'm getting through. I know it's a bit mental, but those are the little things I can remember. BBC News I can remember on the TV, but the reason I stayed downstairs was because it's close to the bathroom, it's close to the kitchen. So from I was over a week I was down here, and the last 2 mornings on here, I had carry bag every day. There was a carry bag full of tissue paper that I'd use to cough into, and there was coughing up phlegm. Sometimes it was like a grey colour, sometimes it was like an luminous green, my nose, and there was a carry bag full daily. But one day I'd run out of carry bags, but it's a paint and decorating bucket, it's a big orange bucket. And it was like the fates knew, because I woke up the next morning and I must have gone from this position, sleeping, and slid, because I woke up on like lying down. But anyway, when I woke up, I was literally on my knees. It wasn't vomiting into the bucket, it was fluid. It was fluid and phlegm. It was literally, that happened 2 mornings running. And that was a bit weird as well, but I took photographs of that too. And during this time as well, my toilet had blocked. Nobody would come out, dining rod wouldn't come out. And it wasn't until my eldest daughter complained to my housing people that one of their own guys came out to fix it. Before then, I had to construct a bucket with a bin liner and old cloths in it to use as a toilet. I couldn't do my washing because the sink was blocking up, overflowing. I've got photographs of me filling buckets, ill and trying to deal with things like that. It was like a week of a nightmare, a total week of a nightmare. I had a couple of vivid dreams that I couldn't quite get. I didn't have diarrhea, which was one of the symptoms of it. I didn't have diarrhea. When I started taking my temperature, I've got one that you use under your arm. When I started taking it 4 times a day. So this was from the Monday. I thought, right, what would they do in hospital? They wouldn't be letting us move about, and I think that's the most important thing, is to move about. Your body needs to move. It just needs to move for your circulation. So I was literally dragging myself around this 26-foot apartment, whether it was leaning on furnishings to get around because I couldn't stand up straight. Breathlessness, pain. I kept doing it, kept moving. I was eating the yogurt, I was eating the hot meals, whether I wanted to or not, I was eating them. I was steaming my face, I was concentrating on my breathing constantly. My vitamin D and my vitamin C daily, and water. And I'm not a big water drinker, I'm normally a coffee drinker. But at first I tried drinking the coffee for warm water, but I just wasn't settling. So I continued to drink plain water. And I will point out at this time, previous to this being ill, I was a smoker. And I've been a smoker since I was 11 years old, and I'm 55 now. So needless to say, that's a habit that's been broken, because when you can't breathe, it's the scariest thing in the world. What else was there? So we're on to the 23rd of March. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I started taking my temperature. Now, when I was getting the chills, I was getting the chills. I was shivering as if I was cold. But when I was doing the temperature, that was when my temperature was spiking. So I had those chills. The week that I was tired in the beginning, I had a fever. But I didn't recognise it, that I didn't take my temperature, but where the chills were. It's the same feeling I had here as well, was those chills. But it was while those chills were happening, my temperature was spiking, and the highest it went was 38.51 or 59. But it wasn't staying there, it was coming back down. So that was a bit scary, but 4 times a day I was taking that and making sure it kept coming down, concentrating on me breathing. But like meditation breathing. But the whole experience was the most frightening, scary. It's like, is it like drowning? I don't know. Where you just can't get any air into your lungs. And even in recovering from it, I've still got a cough. Not as bad, but you've seen I've done it twice already on camera. Not as bad, and I've still got random like twinges kind of within my rib cage, and I'm not sure whether it's my kidneys or liver, what's wrong there, because that's a bit dodgy. It wasn't until the 4th of April that I actually ventured out in the house for a slow walk. More so for fresh air than food, because my daughter would have still delivered and dropped it at the door. We had a routine where she would come in, she'd cover her hair, she'd have her gloves on, she'd have her face covered, and she'd drop the shopping at my door. I'd go out and get it, and then she'd go away and I'd go out and get it. So I only ever seen her behind the door. So the 4th of April was the first time I set foot out of the house. I had a slow walk around town, because to get to a supermarket, although I'm in the centre of the town, and there is like a freezer shop and things, I wanted one supermarket where I could get everything in, so I had one visit. So I walked along to Marks and Spencer's and got everything I needed. Now at that time, the city was really, really quiet, virtually nobody out. I think there was 8 people in the queue, 2 meters apart in Marks and Spencer's, but everywhere else was quiet. Couldn't hear any traffic, nothing. Fast forward to the 24th of April, I went out to do more shopping, and I actually videoed quite a lot, and I put a video up on YouTube. I started from Central Station, Sainsbury's, and I walked in a circle to get to the shops I wanted and back, and took little videos on the way. And I could clearly see more people were out. There was a large queue 2 meters apart at Tesco, and there was other random people out and about. Today, 27th of April, it's tripled. I popped down to Sainsbury's near Central Station and Herons along Cleveland Street, and just the amount of people between those 2 points, I couldn't count them. There were so many. Families out with their children. They could just be all shopping together or going for a daily walk. And whether or not it's people, I don't think it's people flouting rules. I think it's what people have seen are making them feel braver to go out and do their shopping and go out for a walk, a bit of exercise. Because every Thursday night, they clap for the NHS. And I mean, I had posters on my windows supporting NHS, and I was the only one. The first Thursday it happened, I was the only one that I could hear at our block on Clayton Street, Front Street, clapping at a window. But then it became clapping at your door, and then it became clapping in your garden, then it became bang pans, and then it became let's go and gather on Westminster Bridge, and then it became let's all stand outside the hospitals. So people are seeing images and videos of, for example, Westminster Bridge 2 weeks ago, 2 lines from one end of the bridge to the other of official vehicles with the lights going, and the people who were in them vehicles, outside the vehicles, public everywhere on that bridge. If we're seeing things like that, what kind of messages are given? And the news are reporting on it saying, we're supporting our NHS. Who's going to support the NHS when them are all in hospital working NHS to their bone? It beggars belief. And yet nothing from the government or on the news has said anything negative about that. Like the fact they shouldn't have all been on that bridge. They've all had to walk to that bridge. Have all decided to go for the exercise at the same time to get on that bridge to clap for the NHS. It's a mockery. Because any one of you could be spreading that. The same with the people outside the hospitals. Freeman Hospital was the last one I've seen in Newcastle. Loads of staff stand outside the hospital amongst the public and the police. I don't get it. Nothing negative was said about that. Nothing's been said, please don't do this. It's encouraging people. So I think that's happening. So mixed messages, confusion even in the people is coming from the top. So these are the people we look up to: the police, doctors, other emergency services. We look up to them all. The government was supposed to look up to. But when we're seeing that they are part of things like this, what message is that sending? It's just silly. And I think how things are looking today, and the government are probably going to blame it down if people are getting stir crazy, please calm down and please stay indoors. It's not. It's because we are seeing the way you are behaving, how our official bodies are behaving. And people are thinking, well, if you can do it, everything mustn't be that bad. Surely it's not that bad. And I've seen evidence of that myself here from my very window. Homeless people on the street, and the police go and approaching them, this close leaning in, no protection, no gloves. So how else would you expect the public to think, to behave? And when we're on about that, the lockdown. A lockdown would have only been beneficial, in my own logic, in the very beginning, to nip it in the bud, as soon as we knew, lockdown. People would have understood better, especially if there was more transparency within the government of why we need to do things, and the impact if we don't. In the very beginning, that would have been essential, lockdown, because then that's the only way you can contain it. You wait, it's spread already. It's already gone all over the place. It's probably been in the UK way before the end of December 2019, because people fly all over the world. People are flying in now to China, into Heathrow, and travelling up the country, businessmen and everything. We've probably had it around. And how many people have you heard or seen on Facebook saying, I'm sure, did anybody else have this illness in December? Because I was really rotten. Well, me and my family were ill in December, but nothing like this respiratory, where it takes your fucking breath away, and that is swearing. But a lockdown is no, I don't think it's doing much effect now, because all that's happening is when this has happened, and people and the government are now begging you to come and call the hospital or call your doctor if there's something wrong, because people aren't. And there's a lot of people dying in the community, and there's a lot of people dying in care homes that we don't know about yet. So all these figures that they're given daily, it's pointless listening to, because they're not true figures. They're going to be maybe even up to 50% or more than the figures that we're saying. Lockdown should have happened immediately from the beginning, and then testing. Testing should have been done nationwide. Everybody should be tested, because then you can see who needs to be protected, who can still work, what businesses can keep on running. You can do all that, but doing it in drips and drabs the way they've done it, all it's doing is just delaying everything. And I'm not saying that if we did that in the beginning there wouldn't be still a case about, because I'm kind of of the opinion this ain't going to go away. It's another form of flu, but worse. Flu is deadly. People forget that flu is deadly. And the biggest carriers of flu are children. And that's come from the health people on Public Health England. Children are. So, although at the beginning of this they were saying that they weren't going to shut the schools and stuff, children belong to parents who are adults and have grandparents who are older adults. So children are mixing together, and they are more tactile than what adults are when they're playing in the playground and stuff. They sit closer together in the classroom, especially the younger children. So they're passing things between them, and they might not be ill, but they're taking it back to their homes. They're also saying that travel, they don't think travel has got much effect on the spread of this disease. How do you think it got in the UK? Travel? Never. Did it? Well, it come from China. How else did it get here? So they either think we are totally thick, or they are just totally thick, in my opinion, when it comes to things like this. Because where's your logic? Where's your logic? Of course travel does. And on an aircraft, in a confined space, on an aircraft, with all those people in reconditioned air, the close proximity of everybody, and the length and breadth a cough can spread. Come on. We aren't stupid. We're really not stupid. So who knows when this lockdown will end? But I think if you're taking notice of what the saying is, it's only a delay tactic. The lockdowns are to delay the spread of the disease so the National Health Service doesn't get overwhelmed with too many people in hospitals all at once. That's why the 5 Nightingale hospitals have been built, which I think 4 of them aren't even manned or stocked yet. And our hospitals aren't at capacity for the beds. There's beds empty in hospital. Clearly, because now they're begging people to come in. They're not seeing people in accident and emergency and things like this, and heart attacks and stuff. And they're begging you to come in now. People are scared to go in because they don't want to catch anything that's in there, because we know nobody's been tested. The capacity for tests was 40,000 the other day. That's the capacity, it's not the actual tests, because the test centres that you've got to drive to can be miles away from where you are. So until they get all those tests out, nobody's going to really know whether they've got it or not. And until the antibody tests out, I'll not know whether I've got antibodies against that. If it shows I haven't, that may be I didn't have coronavirus, but I had something that was all the symptoms of coronavirus was there, and I thought I was going to flip and die. But we won't know. The most important thing is testing. If everybody was tested, then we would know, and we'd be able to manage that better. It's like going in blind when you don't know who's got what, isn't it? It's like trying to make a cake but not know what the ingredients are. I just think it's a bit silly. And I feel for all those people who are on their own, who haven't got anybody to rely on. Because in my experience, even registering for the vulnerable people, for the shopping packages, that didn't happen. They called me and literally were trying to persuade me to accept this Meals on Wheels type thing, £4 a day for one cooked meal, £28 a week that I haven't got. £28 a week would get me living on my own, my full week shopping. So that help wasn't there. Waiting until people are critical before accepting them into hospital, whether that's by ambulance or family car, is just leaving them to die at home alone. The amount of people who have lost loved ones over this, who haven't been able to be with them at the end of their life, to comfort them, to say goodbye. How can they get closure? To not be able to attend funerals. I think this is the worst thing that could have been done. It really is. If we were all tested from the beginning. The lockdown happened right at the beginning. Everybody was tested during that lockdown. Then we would know. Families would be able to meet at funerals. They would be able to have their weddings. They would be able to have their christenings. I just sometimes think, what are these people thinking? Or is it me? Am I getting it all wrong? Is it me that's thinking wrong? But if what they're saying is true, that it's to slow the spread of the disease. It's not to stop the spread of the disease, it's to slow it. And this herd immunity, they want at least 80% of the people population to get it. We're just delaying that. And in the meantime, this delay is causing lives, deaths, suicides, higher reports of domestic violence, child abuse, higher alcohol use. There's going to be a whole society fucked up because of these lockdowns and because the government aren't being transparent. They're not answering questions. Even that the reporters are asking on the briefings, the reporters will ask the questions and whoever's answering, standing on that podium, they'll waffle and waffle and waffle and waffle around it and don't actually answer the question in a clear, concise way. If they don't know, tell us you don't know. Tell us you don't know. If there's meetings happening regarding our country and the people of our country, we should know who are participants in those meetings. Regardless of whether them change at different types of meetings, we need to know, as they happen, who is taking part in those meetings and what was the outcome of those meetings. And at the moment, we're blind. People are blinded by shit, and that's the only way I can see it. All of those at the top have got little to worry about financially for themselves and their families, and quite a lot of them in government. If they lose the job, what's the worst that can happen? They'll take that risk to be, I'm all right, Jack. Do you know? That's the way I feel, and I don't think this has been handled right at all. And I hope that when this does come to some kind of end, that they'll learn from this. And I've just come to my mind, Dominic Raab gave an interview on BBC News yesterday, and one of the things he come out with, he said, this is the new normal. This is the new normal. Why would you say that to the public on TV? This is the new normal. Does he know how many people suffer depression, anxiety, mental health issues, who will hear that and think, they'll take that, this is the new normal. Do I want to live in this kind of new normal? How many suicides could he alone have caused just by those couple of words? This is the new normal. Because who wants to live in a cage? I don't like to say animals living in a cage, but now humans are living in a cage, in their own little prisons. No. They need to get their act together, sort stuff out, get all that testing rolled out, get people back to work that can go back to work, get the vulnerable looked after, and get this sorted out, because it's ridiculous. It's not going to be the same normal when this is over. It's going to be a different normal. It's not going to be this normal. And by different, I hope that means that we've all, everybody worldwide, whether that's the stay-at-home mum, stay-at-home dad, the single person, the self-employed, the small business, the big business, the governments, I hope it's made them think. People are more important than material things, than finance, than things that you can have everything in the world, but if you're dead tomorrow, then they're good to you. And we all go in the same shaped box, don't we? So, be good to the people will be good to you. Give the people something to wake up for every morning. We need a brighter future, a more thoughtful future, and bring industry back home. Bring industry back home. And for those businesses who want to outsource to places like India and stuff and buy their goods from China, give them hefty fines. Make them pay a lot to be able to do that. Make buying at home easier and cost effective. Not to be having to rely. This should teach us all not to rely on other countries, because in this moment in time we're all in lockdown. And we need to be able to be self-sufficient as a country. And we're a country on our own now. We're no longer in Europe either. So that's my thoughts on the whole situation. What's yours? I realised I missed a couple of things off. Just some of the after effects of not being well is I have lost so much weight. My skin has dried out so much. My hands and my face especially. It's got me more lines. It's just made I'm looking my age now. Muscle tone. I've lost all muscle tone to the point where my arms feel as if they're hanging, my legs feel as if they're hanging. So I've started yoga for that. And one of the symptoms while I was doing it as well, I was blowing blood from my nose. I never coughed up blood, but I did blow from my nose. And whether that was busting a blood vessel while I was blowing it, I don't know, but that was quite a common thing. And I just wanted to mention, when I was talking about people who can't be at families' funerals and things, I was specifically thinking about a young girl. I'm saying a young girl, she's a woman now with a family of her own, but I've known her since she was 8-year-old. And her grandmother, unfortunately, is a victim of COVID, who didn't make it. And the saddest part of that, and the most infuriating part of that, is she was in sheltered accommodation, like some kind of care facility, and she was really unwell. Her daughter was standing on the outside, she could see her through the window. She was on the floor. An ambulance would not come. Our daughter ended up having to ring them again, and I physically had to argue and persuade them to come out and get our mother. She was unconscious on the floor. She ended up in hospital. They did come for her. Took them a while, but they did get her into hospital. She seemed to have been picking up. A couple of days later, she'd ate a meal. The next thing I knew, she took a turn for the worse and she passed away. Now, my little Dot, the girl I'm talking about, and her family would not have been able to be with their nana at that time, or attend any service or funeral for her. And I know how much that lady meant to our granddaughter. So that is the person I was thinking of at that moment. I also want just to add a little bit comment on what I said about all the people in meetings. I think that should apply to anything when it applies to any country, not just the UK. Every country, we should all, the people of that country, these people are making decisions for our country and the people. So the people should know who is making those decisions, who are in these meetings. We need to know that for our minds to know that they are qualified to be discussing and deciding on things for us. Do you know that they're accredited, that they are specialists in the field of what? We need to know all this. That would make us feel more content and safer in the knowledge that, oh yeah, these all know what they're talking about. Where right now we don't know who are part of those meetings. And for those who are saying the minutes aren't available, they actually are if you go to the website. And I did find it just by a Google search. And that was SAGE. I just searched SAGE meetings. And lastly, the WHO organisation and China, CCP, need to be held to account for this, for the delay in letting the world know, and WHO for the constant misinformation. And the latest information, which is scaring people, and myself included, they've said that they don't think that we would create antibodies after getting this virus. And in coronaviruses, it is usual that our body would produce antibodies to protect us from the next bout, i.e. flu. So that is a bit worrying. But do we need to look who's on this WHO organisation panel? They all need to be looked at, and China does need to be held accountable, not only for the delay in letting everyone know, but the correlation between that lab for infectious diseases, which is not far away from this wet market. We need answers to a lot of things, and I know there's different places are in the process of suing China because of what's happened. Because in effect, if they had let alone earlier, this wouldn't have become a pandemic. It could have been contained. It's cost the world billions, trillions, and what further cost is there going to be after that? So I do feel that every country need to get on this and get together and make WHO and China accountable.